Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Forest Business Alliance Grants Management Workshop. We're so glad you are here. There are several other people registered, so we're going to just take a moment and as other people are joining and get started. But we do have a lot of information and we want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So we'll get started here very soon. And I just want to my name is Kathleen. I'll be facilitating today's call with the Forest Business Alliance. And the presenters today are Chris Sacco, Kelly Kahling, and Vance Russell. And they will be presenting different slides throughout. So let me go ahead and share the screen. Although what I'd like to just ask everybody to do, because there's a lot of folks here that perhaps haven't been on the calls together or are not part of the peer learning network. And so as you're coming in and joining, if you can just go ahead and put in the chat who you're associated with, what organization or group, and where you're calling in from. And that way we can get a sense of who's here and get to know each other a little bit more. So go ahead and start doing that on the chat. And I know that folks who join later can't see that, but we'll be capturing that as well in the meeting recording. We will be sharing after this call the meeting recording. We'll be posting that, and we'll prepare the slides in a chapter form for the Forest Business Alliance deck that's online. So that'll become a little while after, but just so you know that the content of the slides will be made available in that format. So welcome, welcome. And let me go ahead and share the screen and we'll kick this off. There we go. Okay, everyone see that okay? Look good? All right. So this is today. This is why you're here. And so the Forest Business Alliance provides technical assistance, workshop, and peer learning networks to help increase local and regional capacity for forest business sectors and organizations. And just also to get a show of hands, if you are a part of the peer learning network, that's a separate group that we run with near monthly meetings to help connect people who are working in similar fields, in similar ways, or compatible ways. I know a few of you on here are part of that. If you are part of the peer learning network, please put PLN in the chat and we can just get a sense. Since a lot of people are not on camera, raising the hand won't work, but please put PLN in the chat so we can kind of get a sense of how many folks are on the peer learning network as well. I'm going to turn it over to Vance with this slide, and then we'll start the presentation after kind of goes through this overview. So Vance, whenever you are ready.
Thanks, Kathleen. Hi, everybody. Great to see you all here. And thanks for joining us. We're going to run through this fairly quickly, but as Kathleen mentioned, there's a recording, and we'll also have this featured as a chapter in the Forest Business Alliance guide that we'll give you a link to online, or you can find on the at forestbusinessalliance.org on our website. So we're going to start, Chris, we're going to start with budgeting. Chris is going to start out with that, go into financial tracking, move into implementation planning, activity tracking, and then finish up with financial and activity reporting and how to request assistance from us. I should say that anytime you need help, we're here to help you out on managing grants, applying for grants, building capacity within your organization. We're a free resource for any type of forest health or forest business project. So feel free to reach out. We'll also give you an email and link for that. But I guess overall, and Chris and Kelly are going to emphasize this, but we're gonna repeat a couple of things a lot during this presentation. One is that if you don't have a good budget and a good plan for your project, it's not really a good project. It's, every project is kind of predicated or built on those two things. And then also, we can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a good, consistent, uh, and sound relationship with your grant manager or your grant managers preferably. Keep them informed about what you're doing. Let them know if you're having challenges with things. Make your reports interesting, your budgets defensible, but make sure that they know what's going on and you're on time with sending them things and you don't change staff or personnel that are managing the grant, making it more difficult for them to track things with you, or you don't assign the management of the grant to an intern. That's a big no-no. Anyway, so I'll get off my soapbox now and hand it over to Chris, and he's gonna start out by talking about budgeting. Thanks, everyone.
Morning, everyone. As Vance said, we're starting off talking about budgeting, and I really like this quote. I think it succinctly states why budgeting is important. You can read it there, but it says a budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went.
Hmm.
I really just I read that a long time ago. So go back actually, just keep it up there. There you go. Preparing a good budget really, during the proposal stage is going to make grant administration far easier. It's going to prevent surprises and really serves as a roadmap for managing and tracking your resources effectively. So go ahead to the next slide. So there are some common reasons why good organizations and really smart people prepare bad budgets. And these include, in my experience, I do a lot of budgeting and support, through FBA and others, initiatives, support a lot of people doing budgets. And so things I've seen over the years, common reasons why, good people and good organizations prepare bad budgets is there's a lack of coordination between staff. Specifically, often see there's a disconnect between the technical and program people and the budget and finance people, which in the end means the costs don't align with the technical approach. And that's a problem at the proposal stage and when the funder is reviewing it, but it's also a problem during the implementation phase when you're trying to, implement what you said you were going to do. Another common one is that the costs you're using are not based in the budget are not based on historical or real data. And then the activities, and we're going to talk about activity planning later in the presentation, but another common one is that you design activities when you're doing the proposal that cost more than the money you have available because you want to get this stuff in there. It's all important activities, things you want to do, going to make your proposal stronger, but you don't budget adequately for those. So when it comes time to implement, you don't have enough money and then you can't fulfill your obligations under the grant. Go ahead to the next one, please. So good budgeting. Taking time to create a good budget during the proposal stage because of all the reasons we've already said, but it also demonstrates credibility and readiness. A well-prepared budget shows the funder that you understand your own project, what it needs in terms of financial resources to be done effectively, and it gives them an inkling too that you know how to manage resources because they see in the way you prepared your budget. A good budget or good budgeting will align with grant goals. Again, it's your roadmap. It's going to ensure that you have a financial plan to support the implementation. It's going to prevent surprises, which I've already said. If you do a detailed planning and budgeting, and then immediately after you win a grant, you go back and you take another look at your budget and you do even more detailed implementation planning, that's going to really help you avoid overspending, missing costs during implementation, things like that. So those kinds of surprises, those are not good surprises during implementation. Connected to readiness and credibility, it increases fundability. If you have a fantastic technical proposal, a grant narrative, but you have your budget is just 3 lines and it's big lump sums and there's no detail, a lot of funders are going to look at that and say, yeah, they know how to write, but we have concerns about whether or not they know how to, manage money, manage an organization, because your budget's just a bunch of lump sums. It will help you track performance. A clear budget, it will help with track financial management, or your finances, but also will help track activities. You can take the financial data and the activities and match those up during implementation, and it's going to help you see, if you're not spending enough, if you budgeted one thing and you're not spending a lot on this activity, or you're spending 10% of what you thought you were going to spend, that may be a sign that there's a problem. So to help you track performance, and then it helps identify gaps early on, gaps in funding and shortfalls of all kinds. Go ahead to the next one. So budget tracking. So we're assuming now that you've done a really nice budget during the proposal stage and you've won the grant. Now it's time to implement. You have to track your budget early and often, continuously, really, throughout implementation. You shouldn't leave it until, a couple of days before your report is due. If it's a quarterly report or a 6-month report or yearly report, whatever, you don't want to look at your budget and track actuals versus the budget at that point, right? You should be someone should be aware of the budget throughout implementation. It's a daily, if not, maybe a weekly thing. You're always looking back at your budget and tracking it against actuals. Again, for all the reasons we already said, but plus, in addition to identifying issues, this is all going to make sure your reporting is spot on, right? If you get to the end, you haven't looked at this thing, you put it on the shelf, you haven't looked at it for 6 months, you have a 6-month report due, and you realize you've underspent by 75%. That's going to raise some flags, right? So it's going to help you identify that stuff and make sure that you have better reports and continue to maintain your credibility with the donor. It also obviously informs decision making if you continuously track it throughout the implementation. One tip on this is that if you automate expense tracking as much as possible, it can be really time consuming if you have a big grant to track expenses for a dozen employees. So there's lots of really good apps out there now where employees can help you track expenses by scanning receipts. So you don't have to, your finance person doesn't have to upload all the receipts at the end of the quarter. They can be scanning those things as they make the expenditures, and those will go into your, can be fed into your accounting system. So highly recommend that you automate as much as possible in terms of, expense tracking and monitoring to help monitor your budget. Go ahead to the next one. All right, match tracking. So a lot of folks on here are probably familiar with the CAL FIRE grants, and a lot of those have matching requirements. Regardless of who the donor is, if your proposal or project requires a match, in the budget phase, you should be making sure that match is feasible. But then once you've won the grant again and it's time to implement, you need to revisit that feasibility of the match you've committed to and make a concrete plan for how you will meet it. You should know already, but then you need to revisit that and make sure that your assumptions during the proposal phase are indeed valid, and that you are going to be able to meet those match requirements. If not, you need to make adjustments before you start implementing. This is going to allow you it's going to allow you to meet the grant obligation, number one, but it's also going to ensure that you have that verifiable documentation that you need to track and to provide to the donor. It's also going to make sure that you have the documentation you need for any potential audit or required audit if it's a requirement of the grant. Again, demonstrates stakeholder commitment. And here's a big one, it prevents disqualification. So if you don't if you have an incomplete or inaccurate match, if you don't have the records to back it up, you could jeopardize your current grant or future funding opportunities. So, matching is a tough one, and we've talked about that in prior presentations at more length. But making sure you have a good plan and tracking it is, again, just wanted to reiterate that. Next slide, please. Implementation planning. So, we talked about budget, introduced that concept again. Doing a good budget, just like that's connected to good financial management and reporting, a solid implementation plan is really important for tracking progress toward your project's goals and objectives. So though you will have, or you should have anyway, fleshed out activities when you're designing your project and creating the budget, often at the proposal stage, what you've submitted doesn't have the level of detail that you need as a project manager for tracking activities and doing the implementation of the project. So we highly recommend that once you win a grant, you sit down with your team and you do a detailed implementation plan that takes what you've said in the proposal, takes all that documentation you prepared, and goes into a lot more detail on it. So you update schedules and plans, targets, you make sure you have all the systems in place, people assigned to do them. You put all that detail down in a plan to ensure that the implementation is as smooth as possible. Some people call that startup planning. I typically refer to it as implementation planning. It's also closely monitored implementation planning to your monitoring, evaluation, and learning system, which we're going to look at in a moment. But all of these things are tied together. Obviously, they're not separate, but really implementation planning and the MEL system or the meal system are very closely tied. So go ahead to the next slide, Kathleen. Why do we dip? You can guess some of the reasons from that prior slide, but a DIP is the acronym for Detailed Implementation Plan. First and foremost, it ensures that you meet your contractual obligations under the grant. It also it ensures you deliver, whatever you're contractually obligated to do, but that you also maintain a quality standard. It helps you do that, and that you maintain timely implementation and within budget. So detailed implementation and the connection to budget are really close here. I'm skipping down a little bit in my notes, but it's important to remember that although you do have a proposal and you're going to have to do more detailed planning than what's in your proposal, you're not starting with a blank page. The proposal provides a strong basis for the DIP. And if you use the next slide, in just a second, we're going to look at a project framework and a DIP spreadsheet that FBA has put together you can use. But if you use those things, the tools that we've developed, it really help you put together a good one, I think. So go to the next one, Kathleen. So this is an example. What you see on the screen there is an example of a tool that FBA put together. And again, it's probably pretty small on your screen. You won't be able to see all the details, but we have on our templates page, which Vance will talk about at the end, we have a multiple, there are 4 or 5 different worksheets in a Excel workbook. And one of them is called a project framework template. And that one will actually help you during the design phase to plan out your goals, objectives, and activities. And then within that same workbook, there's another one that's called a detailed implementation plan, which actually ties back to the project framework. So that once you fill in that first worksheet, the project framework, it starts to fill in the subsequent worksheet in the workbook, which will be the beginnings of your detailed implementation plan. And then you can fill out more detail on the DIP worksheet, and that will start to fill out your meal or your monitoring, evaluation, and learning plan. So it's all tied together. We did it that way, so you didn't have to copy and paste from one sheet to the next. But we really highly recommend that folks who are creating complex multi-year projects, that you use a tool like that from the proposal stage all the way through to implementation. And that even if you don't use our tool, you should at the very least be doing these things in some form or another. So a project framework to design your proposal, and then a detailed implementation plan, at least the outlines of it during proposal stage, and then a really detailed one during implementation startup. And then also during implementation startup, you really need to be putting together a meal monitoring, evaluation, and learning system to guide the M&E activity throughout the project, right? You won't be using any of these things. Well, we're going to talk more about CAL FIRE in a minute, but on the eCivis portal, what you actually end up reporting to the donor, and whether it's CAL FIRE or someone else, you will not use all the information generated by these systems, right? By the MEL system. Go to the next one, Kathleen. Next slide.
And Chris, just a couple more minutes.
Yep. I'm going as fast as I can. All right. You won't use everything that's on there, but it's important for you as a project manager to have that information available to you, because what you're going to report to the donor is really you're reporting just a fraction of the information being generated by your project. So when you develop a meal system, or I use the terms interchangeably, meal and MEL. They're the same thing. It's an M&E system, but they're just a little slightly different acronyms. But you need to have a lot more information to really be able to know what your project's doing. What you report to the donor are the things that you've kind of highlighted as what is going to show them sort of what you want them to see in terms of the progress, right? You're going to decide on those things. Internally, though, you're going to track a lot more than that, most likely. So when you do your MEL system, we probably need an entire workshop just on that. But a MEL system really integrates like kind of your indicator level things, what you're reporting to the donor, and then your activity planning. So, and your activity tracking. So you're looking at, how many workshops did we put on? How many, trainings did we do? How many, whatever. That's all activity level stuff, right? And then in addition to that, in a real MEL system, you're using different data sets and more data to create to track indicators like how many bone dry tons of biomass did we use in our facility, or whatever happens to be. That's going to require a different level of tracking, but all of that stuff should be part of your MEL system. And then last but not least, could you go to the next slide? Yeah, this is an example of an activity tracking. Again, goes back to that bigger workbook that we talked about, that I mentioned earlier. This is just another page in there. It gets down to the specific activities. You can track, each one at a very granular level. You might have, 2 objectives, but you might have 20 activities, right? So that activity tracking workbook, which is in that, or worksheet, which is in that greater workbook, will allow you to track all of this stuff in very fine detail. And with that, we'll stop and turn it over to Kelly.
Thanks, Chris. And just remind everybody, we'll have time for questions at the end. So
yeah, I went pretty fast.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Kathleen. Yeah, this is going to be getting into some detail about invoicing and the eCivis portal. I'm going to try to go fast, but it is a lot. And then we'll try to pause for questions. One Well, all funding organizations are going to require progress reports and financial reports, and CAL FIRE actually requires an activity report as well. So that's 3 reports you'll need to do if you're doing CAL FIRE. And these reports need to be done accurately and timely. And this helps you as much as it helps your grant organization. It keeps everybody on schedule, on track with reporting. It ensures transparency with your funding agency, maintains compliance, and supports future funding opportunities. So CAL FIRE usually requires an activity report with every invoice. They like them to arrive together. Your activity report is where you will track your project milestones and deliverables. It's where you have an opportunity to describe your accomplishments, challenges, and point out any adjustments or improvements that you plan to implement. It's also a good time to check in with your approved scope of work. You want to make sure your activities are aligned with your grant deliverables. Excuse me. The activity reports are submitted on a regular schedule. It's a great way to keep close tabs on your expenditures and your budget. CAL FIRE requires at least one invoice per quarter usually, but they cannot do more than 1 per month, but they're pretty flexible in what they require. In your financial reporting, this is where you're going to lay out all your costs associated with the activities performed during the reporting period. You're going to provide detailed expenditures by budget category. So you'll produce backup documentation, could be receipts, you'll need timesheets, vendor invoices, what have you. And all these reports will all need to reconcile with your internal accounting records. And your financial report, it's really a summary of what your costs were during your reporting period. Having these regularly scheduled reports helps you stay on track with your grant timeline and the budget. There's some keynotes. You're going to use standardized templates. They're provided by your funder, and CAL FIRE will provide a template for you to use as a payment reimbursement form. And then you want to keep your records really organized and audit ready. Always prepare your documents with the thought of an auditor in mind. You want to make sure that they can find everything. It's like, will they see everything? Is everything here? And your grant manager is always a great resource. So always communicate with the grant manager about any issues or changes that you have. Next slide. So many of you likely have received or applied for CAL FIRE grants. And like most funders, CAL FIRE requires both progress reports and financial reports. As you can see here, these are the requirements for the tribal wildfire resilience and the business and workforce development programs. I know all of you are at different stages in your grant. So we're gonna start getting into some nitty gritty here. I'm gonna try to keep it short for each section, hopefully get some questions in. So just to summarize, invoicing and reporting involves a 3-step process. So with each invoice, you'll complete the online progress report form. CAL FIRE provides you a template, and we'll give you some guidance on this document. That's part of your onboarding process when you're awarded a grant. The activity report you'll complete in eCivis, and the financial report will be submitted to eCivis as well. And next slide.
Because we chose to.
Because it's fun, that's why. So once you've been awarded your grant, you're ready to start thinking about invoices. The first thing you want to do is get organized. So you want to put a schedule together. Who's going to do what? Where will we store files? How will they be organized? So put together some directories and some file folders in your computer, and then organize the folders by reporting dates, create your files and folders, think about your billing categories, how you want those arranged, and then start a calendar with some target dates. You want to collect the data that you need and figure out when you want to plan to submit your reports. You want to set cutoff dates for invoicing and reporting time periods. I highly recommend you use a calendar month, like the 1st to the 30th or the 31st, or it could be 2 months, or it could be a quarter, but something that starts and stops on a calendar month, and that's going to keep things simple and save you trouble and time. Then you want to set deadlines with your staff and vendors for when they give you receipts and timesheets. So for example, say you want to tell them, hey, I need timesheets by the 5th of the month, or I need all your receipts by the 7th of the month. So you can stay on track and get done the things you need to get done. Always make sure the receipts that you have show clearly the date purchased. So, and timesheets always need to show the dates worked, because CAL FIRE is very particular about dates. So always make sure your dates are accurate and fall within the reported ranges. And then communicate with your team and your staff so everyone knows their roles and responsibilities. You want to designate someone to do the progress reports, someone to do the financial reports, and someone to do the backup documentation. You might want to assign someone to collect receipts. Get all that stuff ready and in place, and then you're good to go. Next slide. Well, the next thing you will want to do is become familiar with the eCivis portal. All CAL FIRE reimbursements are entered through the eCivis portal. So the first thing you want to do when you're thinking about creating your first invoice is you want to start reviewing your current budget totals. So what you see here is your eCivis award dashboard. If you click on the blue view budget button on the dashboard, the screen that comes up will take you to this very small, you can see the green Excel icon next to actions. And hitting this button will create and export an Excel file that shows you your current filed budget. Take a look at this box on the right. This is an example of what a CAL FIRE budget looks like. Each of these blue stripes is a budget category, and the categories are salaries and wages, employee benefits, contractual, travel, so on, supplies, equipment. Depending on how your budget was set up in your grant application. So if for the budget categories that you have an award for, you will see dollars in that direct cost column. Does anybody have questions on how to read their CAL FIRE budget? There we go. All right, next slide. All right, so let's think about preparing your financial report. You'll need to prepare a CAL FIRE invoice form. It's a one-page form. What you see here, we've got two different examples of the same form. It's a template provided by CAL FIRE. This is where you're going to summarize all your expenses incurred during the invoice reporting period. So the timing and the dates, very important to CAL FIRE. So the date you include in your form must be accurate. So highlighted here in yellow, a couple of crucial dates and items that you want to take note of. So first you'll enter your submittal date at the top. Your submittal date's got to be within 1 week of the date you enter and submit your invoice to the eCivis portal. So you want to plan in advance, because I've gotten rejected before. You know, he says, oh, it's been too long. I just, need you to re-sign it, redo it. So always be ready to submit it with a date that you choose that's going to be pretty close to those dates. And then the other important date range is this invoice reporting period. And this period must encompass all dates worked and items purchased. And I'll tell you, this is the #1 reason that I've had an invoice rejected. So let's say you're preparing your invoice for the period of June 1st to June 30th. Everything's going according to plan. And then someone submits a receipt to you from March 1st, which is outside that range. So all receipts and dates worked, they must fall inside your invoice reporting period range. So what you need to do is you just go back and adjust that range to include that March receipt. And now you have a range of March 1st to June 30th. It's okay to overlap with a previous invoice. CAL FIRE understands that things happen. This is how things work, and this is how things happen. They understand. Looking at the CAL FIRE invoice form, you'll also need to show, you'll have your current costs for the invoice reporting period, and then your expended costs to date, like a cumulative total of what your costs have been. And you really need to keep careful records at this point. Make sure you're tracking these kinds of totals. So for each category, you need your current for the month and your cumulative. And then you want to check and make sure that all your numbers are accurate and your totals add up correctly. Always double check for accuracy because they will send it back if they find a mistake. You know, having a rejection, it costs you time. You have to wait for your reimbursement. It's never fun. So always try to get it right the first time. Also make sure your form will be signed and dated. It's got to be an authorized signer. Next slide, please. This is about your backup documentation. So for every budget category, you're going to create one PDF file packet. You should have one packet per budget item that's listed on your invoice form. And each packet is going to include the receipts, the invoices, and the supporting documentation. They don't want you to combine any categories into a single file. All those categories should be in a separate PDF file. Also, they request don't include any extra files. They don't need anything extra, and it just confuses them. And then they'll also ask you to follow this format for naming them. They'll tell you all this at your onboarding when you're awarded the grant, but they request that these files are all PDF files. The file name should follow this consistent format. They'll give you these instructions that you're going to start with your grant ID number, followed by your invoice number, and then ending with the corresponding budget item category. And then it also includes a position number. And this just allows the files to upload in a consistent order, and they really appreciate that. Each documentation packet should include pertinent information needed to clearly describe the invoice, including itemized receipts, which you're also going to attach, invoices from vendors. You'll have workers' names, positions, dates worked, pay rates, a brief description of the work performed. And then all these file packets will be uploaded into the financial reporting section on eCivis. Also, if you have matching contributions, then you'll need to make supporting documentation in a similar way. Just the receipts, labor hours, rates, descriptions of work performed, all these should be included, just like it would be for the other backup information. If you're splitting the cost of a purchased item and maybe contributing a portion of it as match and a portion of it as an expensed item, just go ahead and write that on the receipt. They always appreciate any help that would help them sort through all these things. All that is much appreciated. And as always, all your documentation should be retained for audit purposes, and make sure everything is easy to follow, easy to find, and easy to read. Do we have any questions on backup documentation? All right, next slide, please. All right, when all your documentation is ready and it's time to submit your invoice, you can go to your dashboard in the eCivis portal. You can hit that green button at the top that says Submit Financial Report. The financial report screen shows your grant information at the top. It's a summary that shows how much you've been awarded and how much you've spent. Then there'll be a field where you can enter your reporting period. It's right there off your invoice form, and you enter that in. Under that's a section where you're going to enter your costs by budget category. So there's fields provided under each budget category item where you're going to type your entries, and you're going to enter one line for each item, such as a receipt or a worker timesheet or a vendor invoice. And all these will be on your the categories from your invoice form. And when you first look, there's only going to be one line there. There'll be, you can see under where it says category and then GL code and activity, there's one line for you, but you need to use that plus button and that will produce more rows. Just make sure that you use that minus button to eliminate them if you've made too many rows. There's the CAL FIRE eCivis Grants Portal Grantee User Guide. It has a great section that explains how to fill in those GL codes and description. It's a really great resource. We should put the link to that in the chat there. Under that section, there's a little narrative section. You can enter any notes or pertinent information relating to your invoice that you want to explain to your CAL FIRE grant manager. And eCivis does require that you enter something here. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be one sentence. I usually just say, activity report is submitted separately, and it just gives them a heads up that that's on its way. But they do require you put something in that box. Now at the bottom of the screen, there's this green button where you'll upload your files, including the CAL FIRE invoice form and all your backup documentation. And then when everything is ready and the files are uploaded, you can hit that red button and submit report. Does anybody have questions on doing your entering of your financial report into eCivis?
We can probably take a couple minutes. Are you almost done? I can't remember how many more slides, Kelly. Are you ready for the next one?
Close. I think pretty close. I think,
Okay.
yeah,
Because
I
we're
think,
about ready to go to questions, so we can do them all at the end.
okay, sounds good. Yeah, this is about it for the detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next slide is just is going to be activity reporting. If you want to switch
Okay.
that, you're going to use the information from your meal system or your mail system that Chris had talked about, and you're going to use that to complete your activity report. And a progress report and activity report must be submitted at the same time as the financial report. CAL FIRE will provide you a template as part of your onboarding process if you're awarded a grant. And you can always ask your grant manager for some detailed instructions on completion and submission of these reports. And then to submit the activity report, you will click on that green button at the top right and follow the instructions, upload your files, and input any other necessary information. And then anything else on activity reports, I'm going to ask Chris if he can throw in a few comments about filling those reports out.
Should I go to the next slide? Or stay
Yeah,
here?
I'll jump in and do that
Okay. Next slide.
quickly. Yeah, next slide, please. So really quickly on progress reports, you know, these tips are pretty straightforward. Keep it simple, quantify as much of your results as you can. Don't fret if everything isn't going as planned, but make sure you document that and try to, you know, not report it in the negative, but try to reframe it in a more constructive manner, and maybe even what you're going to do to alleviate or address it. And then, you know, duplicating work is part of automation and making reporting easier, but don't copy the same report every month and send it in. Like, try to change it. But you know, if you create a template, if you automate some of the data that goes into your reporting, that makes it faster to report. And then one final thing that I'll say about reporting is it can be drudgery to do reporting, and you can have to do lots of reports, but within the framework of the requirements for your grant, try to be creative. Like, look at reporting to learn something about the project. Look at it as a way to create reporting items or blogs or articles that you can put into your newsletter or your annual report or other things that reach out to people that care about your business or your organization. So make those reports do double duty. And also, this doesn't work really well with federal and state agencies, but it can work with foundations or sometimes with private donors. Maybe push back on the reporting requirements and let them know that if they're onerous, that it might be possible to change them, or it might be possible for reports that you're submitting for CAL FIRE to work for a foundation that you also have a grant from, or an investor that is investing in your business. So, you know, I think the bottom line there is just be creative about reporting, make it work for you, not just who you're reporting for, and take advantage of those things and think outside the box a little bit. So I'll let Kelly finish up with amendments next.
And then we'll go in just a minute to questions.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. So sometimes in your grant, you'll find that your workflow and your invoicing needs have changed at some point during the life of your grant, and you'll need to file an amendment. So Any budgetary changes among your categories. Let's say you need to hire more people. Let's say you decide that you didn't need a piece of equipment that you thought you'd need before, or maybe the prices come out different. Things to do, always consult with your grant manager. Your grant manager, it's a great resource who will offer you some guidance in this process. So an amendment usually looks like a letter explaining what you propose to change and why. And this document will be entered into eCivis. Amendment documentation should reference your budget report and fully explain what you are trying to accomplish. Amendments take time to process, and there's two kinds. There's a minor amendment for budget shifts that are within a budget category, and those are the quicker ones. They only take, a couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks, maybe up to 4 to process. Or a major amendment with CAL FIRE is when you're shifting budget from one category to another budget category, and these take longer and come up to be 4 weeks or maybe even more to process those. During this time, eCivis is frozen and you will not be able to invoice. So you do want to plan ahead when you want to make your amendment. So consider the impacts on your cash flow, plan ahead, try to predict the need for an amendment to your grant, and then time the submittal of the amendment so it's ready to go during a time that you will not need to submit an invoice to eCivis. Anyone else have anything on amendments? All right, next slide. That's all.
So we can wrap it up here and you can look at these. I've already shared the link to the templates and also the FBA guide. If you look at in the upper right, or if you go into that link for the guide and click on the little black and white circle, you can be cooler and go into dark mode instead of the white mode here. But as we said, we're adding chapters to that book, and some of the items that Chris presented, like program design or project design, and eCivis, as Kelly mentioned, are chapters in the book. There's also a chapter on proposals and compliance and other things that should be useful for forest businesses. So with that, we can start taking questions if folks have them.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop the share so that we can check the chat. So if you also want to put a question in the chat, you're welcome to do that. But if you're able to come online and just verbalize your question, please go ahead and either raise your hand or you can unmute yourself and open up to questions now.
Has
Hi,
anybody?
it's Stephanie with,
Sorry.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, I'm just gonna let you know my internet's really weak, so if you don't hear me,
Wait.
someone let me know. So
We can hear you.
You cannot, or you can?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you. You guys come in intermittently, so I'm just curious if ever moving forward, you might add a chapter to the book, sort of guiding small nonprofits who may get themselves involved with a public works project, because that's kind of a challenge in and of itself, and sort of any resources or help to navigate all that would be hugely helpful, besides hiring a very expensive consultant. Just wondering. Vance, you're laughing.
Yeah, we could consider
Yeah.
that. It's not it's interesting, Stephanie. It's not a topic that's come up, but I think public works and connected to restoration or water and forests is definitely an issue. And so yeah, it definitely presents a whole different realm of management, money, and financial and project management, dealing with the different governmental agencies, depending on what level you're working at. But yeah, we could definitely consider that.
Okay, just thought I'd throw it out with there while I have you.
Thanks for the suggestion. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Stephanie. Any other questions, or anyone want to put any questions in the chat?
Kelly, you were
Yeah.
gonna ask a question before Stephanie started.
You know, I just wondered, since we still have a few minutes, I wondered if anybody is actually working in eCivis, and if they're finding any issues or difficulties with using that portal. It's a little tricky in the beginning, but just it gets easier. Just wanted to give you that. It does get easier when you get used to it.
If anyone is working in eCivis, you could either raise your Zoom hand or raise your regular hand if you're on video, just so we can get a sense of who's working in eCivis already. Or put it in the chat as well. Nope.
Amy, I don't know if you're listening, but I noticed that you're with the Strategic Growth Council and Tribal Capacity Building Project. We also have a capacity building program with tribes. It'd be great to connect with you on that. I know that's not the topic of this, but we'd love to reach out to you and connect on that.
That sounds great. Thanks so much.
I have one quick question. So I'm a small business owner in Sonoma County, California, and one of the problems I have is dealing with the waste that comes from my sawmill, and in particular, like the slash. And a lot of people have suggested to invest into a burn box, which produces biochar as an end product. Is that something I could apply for? And then I guess my second question is for smaller sawmill operations, what could they be looking for to help them with their inventory and apply for a grant? Or is this more for like nonprofits and governmental agencies?
No, it's for both, and it's the program that Kelly was referring to funds both nonprofits and businesses that are small and larger. And it's a unique program along with the Forest Service program that does similar things for wood innovation, in that it directly funds businesses. A lot of state programs only fund nonprofits. This one funds both. And then just to your question about a burn box for biochar, yeah, that would be definitely something that you could apply for funding for. The Sonoma Ecology Center, have you connected with those folks at all? There's a couple of folks at the Ecology Center that have done quite a lot of work with burn box and biochar. I can connect you up with those folks if you want. They've got a fair bit of experience and a couple of pilot projects as well. And then Tamara Costa, who's with Forestry Collective, is also doing a lot of work in the forest space. I don't know if you're connected with them.
I do.
As well. Yeah, happy to connect you with those folks if you leave your email in the chat, or if you message me afterwards. But yeah, I think the thing with the grants is that you generally they're pretty competitive. In the last round they had 5 million available. There was something like 103 different applicants and a total of, I want to say, 80 million requested. So the program is the CAL FIRE program is really oversubscribed. So you have to have a good project. It's gotta be scalable. And it's gotta employ people, and you also have to show that you're treating a lot of wood. So that's kind of the challenge there. But there are programs for smaller wood utilization too. Like, I mean, for, burn box biochar, there's a lot of smaller programs to just to get up and running. That isn't that kind of technology isn't very costly. So you might even be able to get a grant from USDA or Department of Agriculture if they have those grants still, or the California Department of Ag. And it pays to look at different energy programs as well. So Jeff Grief, who was on the call earlier but had to jump off, he's with Plumas Wood Fiber. He's also another really great resource for looking at a lot of different programs, big and small, for businesses. He has a business that is creating wood fiber from biomass. So happy to connect you to him as well for a download of like what he's learned.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for that, Vance. Good question. Anyone else? If not, Kelly or Chris, did you have any other pieces that you wanted to add that you didn't get a chance to or time to in your presentations, or Vance?
I had a question actually for folks just about we didn't, again, very briefly touched on the meal or MEL system. I mean, probably more likely for the nonprofits, but I guess a question to people, do you go through the exercise of creating or do you have an organization-wide meal system? Are you collecting data and using it to learn, or is it more project by project, just collecting data on the required indicators? If anyone wants to answer that, I'm just curious if.
Well, again, this is Stephanie. So we don't have an organization-wide MEL. We just collect the data based on each project specific. We don't really integrate it into a full overall comprehensive learning opportunity. So I kind of like that idea. Is that something you can help us all with?
Well, I mean, that's like Vance said, I think that's really the hope, right? Is that you're learning from, it's not just reporting to the funders, you're actually using this information, gathering information and using it to learn and improve your programs, right? Or your organization and programs. So yeah, we could potentially, if there was enough interest, we could do a specific workshop on that, I think, for sure.
I mean, for me personally, I would attend. I feel like that's a really good opportunity and probably something we should be moving towards implementing, right?
Yeah, big topic, but I think a workshop, we could at least start it, right? At least get people thinking about,
Yeah.
how to do it. So, okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Carrie, go ahead. Thank you for that, Chris and Stephanie. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. It's nice to see all of you. I've had to be a little bit in and out of this meeting, so I apologize for missing some of it. But Chris, I found that the dip in particular really helpful, because so often, especially in an organization where you're applying for grants really in an ongoing way and not just like 1 or 2 big grants a year, but like, 10 to 15 to I don't have quite as many as 30 in my current position, but I have worked at organizations where that was the case, if not, 60 grant applications a year. And it can get really overwhelming quickly. And so not only tracking your outcomes, but also just looking at the framework. I guess my question is, maybe kind of a big squishy question, but wondering if you've ever used a tool like this framework, the ProFrame, which is really great, and the DIP across multiple grants, and if you had any suggestions for sort of integrating this so that it can be used as one tool. Say you have a grant or a project that has multiple phases, some of which are funded by different funders. And if you, had any sort of insights or experience with using this across multiple funders to achieve some of the same goals, but not necessarily for every single funder, if that makes sense.
Does, yeah, and that's actually, those tools came out of an experience that Vance and I were both part of from an organization called Groundswell. And so we had about 25 grants at any given time. And we implemented that system because it was so onerous to track them each one separately. So it took us about 3 years to move to implement it, because we had to get on the funding cycle so that we could actually use our ProFrame and DIP like institutional, across the entire organization, to then use that to ask for grant funding. So it was a long-term project, but now it's being done, and it so that you basically refer back to, you see where you are in terms of your pro frame for the whole organization, and then you're asking for money to fill in the blanks, sort of.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
really helpful to think of
yeah.
it as both a pre planning tool and then a post grant tracking tool at the same time. It
And
makes
then
it
the
worth
MEL
the
system.
investment.
And then the MEL
Yeah.
system too, right? So your indicators, like we chose indicators, we had, kind of 5 different buckets, and we had 3 or 4 indicators for each one. And then our principal activities, which we kind of knew what those were. We've been
Yeah.
doing the same thing it was an ag organization. We knew what those were. And so we kind of looked back over a 10-year period and figured out, what are the things everyone's been asking us to track, and we use that to inform our meal system. And then, but as it took hold, by and large, we were able to not add new indicators. We could just track the ones we've been tracking for years. So I don't know if that makes sense, but so,
Yeah.
and it basically the same occasionally we would add a unique indicator and some new activities, but by and large, I'd say 95% of the time, we just stuck to that. And then it started to generate information that was really useful, right? Because we could look back over years and see, for this area we're working in, what are the changes in these indicators, not over 3-year project span, but over now they're 7 or 8 years into it at this point. So that really is about the learning, right? And so you can look back over a really, if you continue to use it for 10 years, you have some really reliable data.
Yeah.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Gary. Yeah, Chris did most of the work for that. I was just chair of the board.
You supported.
But it was amazing, like how much it helped change the organization. It was
Yeah.
really useful, really
Yeah.
incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Oh, Kathleen,
Just saw that. Thank you. Any final questions? We are just a few minutes over, but if there's another burning question, we can definitely tackle it. Okay. We will consider it complete then. Thank you so much to Chris and Kelly and Vance for the presentations and for the good questions as well. And when this is fully uploaded, we'll go ahead and share it on the FBA YouTube site, and then also the compilation for the content. So we'll notify folks when that is out through the FBA listserv. If you're not on that, you can reach out to forestbusinessalliance@gmail.com, right? Or just the website. Is that
Yeah,
right, Vance?
yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, any final comments, Vance or Chris or Kelly?
No, thanks everyone. And
can we
great work,
put
Chris and Kelly.
sorry, Vince.
Go
Could we
ahead.
put a link to that user guide? The CAL FIRE has a user guide. If we either in the chat or some other place.
Yeah. I think we can do it in the follow-up email, since most people who are already off might not see that chat. But we'll do it in the follow-up email so that everyone can just have that quick link. That's a great idea.
And
Yeah.
just because it's going to be on the recording. So in the FBA templates, in the Word documents that are the guidelines for the using the templates, we do reference that in a couple of them in a couple of different places.
Oh,
So
good.
to yeah, but we should definitely include it in the email as well.
Great. Yeah, good point. Good point for that. Especially depending on how the presentation is shared. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Gonna go ahead and